Ah, there you go.
How about that? Okay, so it's all right. That's good. I'm glad you can see me. Welcome everyone to Accuracy in America. We're going through it's technology. Just never know what's going on there. So I'm glad that we can see each other. Brian would have had to rely on trying to figure out when I stopped talking to figure out when he needed to talk. That could have been interesting. Anyway,
you could have made faces when I said weird stuff, but I would have never known.
That's right. All right, as usual, I'm Don Irvine, joined by my co-host Brian McNichol.
Good morning, hello, deplorables, dregs, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, and those dog-paced pony soldiers.
That's right. All right, so I thought I'd just mention, we don't have to spend a ton of time on this, obviously. It's just, it turns out to be that this show hits exactly on my father's 99th birthday. He's been gone since 2004, but he definitely left his mark in the world. Not something that I think, when I look back at his life, I can't imagine that he would have ever imagined when he was a young man, or even, trying to think. Let me see. When did he? How old would he? He would have been 37 when AIM started. So so say he was in his early 30s. There's no way he saw Accuracy in Media coming, and that he was going to wind up, in essence, retiring. As soon as he possibly could to get his pension from the government, and then devote the rest of his time to AIM. But yeah, I think he left a pretty indelible mark for conservatives and the media, and there's a lot of good that came out of what he did, I think, in the long run.
So he was very much ahead of his time, right? You think about Washington now; there are hundreds, if not thousands, of policy organizations, basically, right? They're on some wave of the Washington thing. There's some that are devoted to tax policy, and some to defense policy, and more than one now to media policy, to media, where the media stands in society and what it does and so forth. But when he came up with this, that wasn't the case, right? There were far fewer, thought organizations, think tanks, whatever you want to call them, in Washington, activist organizations, right? This was kind of a new industry. And, the story he chose to follow, has turned out to be the story, right? I mean, media bias now is the story. People are deplatformed, views that the media doesn't like, they attempt to quash. And now there's a cottage industry of going around the quashing, right? And all this was stuff, it's like my sister told me, my dad, he couldn't have handled the coronavirus, right? Sitting at home, and your dad and this would have been, this would have been the story of the ages, right? I mean, he would have been working, 24 hours a day, every day, right? So, I mean, what he came up with here was breakthrough, and it's not a lot of people have original thoughts that they can make a difference in the world, but he did.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Brian. I mean, you're right, though. If you look at 1969, when he went ahead and launched AIM, who was really out there? I mean, he really preceded the Heritage Foundation. Phyllis Schlafly started to make a mark probably around 1970. Trying to beat back the Equal Rights Amendment, things like that. But there were just not a lot of policy organizations of any kind in that late 60s, early 70s period. I mean, now, they're formed at a drop of a hat. I mean, it's mind-boggling how many organizations there are, in the conservative space, not just to mention the liberal space, but just overall. And you're, on media. Yeah. I mean, we have Media Research Center and Daily Wire. You've got a plethora now of media type organizations from right, center, left. And that's kind of what he wound up kind of spawning, in a sense, is all of those organizations. He showed that, there was a need for this, and we've tried. I mean, I think, the conservative organizations have been trying to hold the liberal media accountable. And, if we had been able to truly beat them back, what's their reason for existence? But the liberal media is still out there. still requires organizations like AIM and the others to go out there and continue to fight those battles. So, we're not going to give up on that. All right. So moving on, yesterday, interesting hearing on the Hill with Milley, Austin, and McKenzie. Probably not exactly how Joe Biden would have wanted that to turn out, I guess, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, they all came out and said that they advised him to keep some troops there, about the same amount of troops, coincidentally, that Trump had kept there. Right. So, it looks like Trump dealt with military advice on a little bit higher level than Biden did. But it looks like Biden, in fact, ignored the advice, and with tragic outcomes. Also, one of the things that I'm interested in digging into is General Milley said that his call with his counterpart in China, that, he had two calls with his counterpart in China during the Trump administration, when he said, we understand y'all think we might attack you, and I'm calling to tell you we're not going to attack you. And then he called later and said, we're in transition, and it's a little, messy here right now, but we have control of the situation, and if anything bad starts to happen, I will let you know. We will not surprise you. You will know ahead of time. So, he says that Mark Meadows and Mike Pompeo and another member of Trump's inner circle knew he was making these calls. So, someone needs to stick a microphone in their face and say, did you know this? And did you agree with it? Did you authorize it? And, did you tell the president? Did the president realize it? Because, Milley's, if that's true, then that kind of changes the, story of that call, of those calls.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I mean, what's your take though here in terms of before? I mean, the Republicans, have been calling for Milley to resign. There's been some pressure on Austin as well to resign or be fired and things like that. I mean, who comes out of this whole thing, looking better? I mean, our defense, people here in terms of what they advise Biden. How does Biden? How does the administration continue to call this a success, especially now that we've got these guys saying, look, we advise you to keep 2,500, 3,500 troops.
And Biden says no one told him to keep troops there, right? I mean, his story is he never got that advice from anyone. So, somebody is not telling the truth there, and it's possible that, Biden just doesn't remember, right? I mean, you have to allow for that possibility with him, right? I mean, it's true. I mean, he might not remember, and they get a lot of advice, and if you're dead set on doing something, you may not hear all the conflicting information that comes out and whatnot. So I don't know. I mean, people have been saying this guy should be fired, that guy should be fired. Who misjudged the intelligence? Who said, hey, we've got 90 days, and when you had 90 hours? That's what I want to know. Who made the call to not keep Bagram and instead try to get all these people out of the Kabul airport, which we can't protect, as opposed to Bagram, which we had already protected. So, you find out those two, to me, are the calls that led to the most chaos. And if you find out who's responsible, you can isolate who's responsible for those calls. Then those people probably do need to move on, because they made some pretty tragic decision. And I also think now that they have come out and said this, you'll quietly start to see some changes over there.
Now, what about this thing too? I mean, didn't Milley? I mean, didn't they say yesterday too that they were surprised about how fast the government collapsed? I mean, 11 hours. They weren't expecting that. I mean, who's to blame for that? I mean, should they not have known a little bit more about that situation?
That's right. That's what I'm saying. That, the people who said they had, 90, the Afghan army could hold on, the government could hold on for 90 days when they couldn't hold on for 90 hours after that statement. Who thought that? Who thought they had 90 days? And, why did they think that? Who told them you had that much time? Because they obviously didn't. They were obviously caught unprepared. And they're talking about, we still have over the horizon intelligence view on this, but you're in the country intelligence view was not accurate. So your over the horizon is even less trustworthy, as as far as I can tell. So, who is responsible for that information, and how did those decisions get made? I think that's how you determine who to fire. And I doubt, the way that Democrats operate, that they will fire anybody, because if you fire people, you admit, that you didn't get it right, and they don't ever admit.
Right. And I'm just kind of wondering. I mean, having them up on the Hill yesterday, I mean, it does change the focus a little bit. At least, there was some light being, shined on this whole situation. But I'm concerned that that there's not going to be a lot happening otherwise. I mean, there may be some low level people that'll be dismissed or whatever. People will be made some scapegoats for what happened over there. But I still don't know what the administration is planning to do in Afghanistan, and I don't know if the media is going to keep up the pressure, because there's so many other things happening that are going kind of wrong with the Biden administration. Is Afghanistan going to be kind of a pushed down the ladder a little bit, kind of forgotten, and just the Taliban's going to just run wild and free, and the U.S. is really not going to pay much attention?
Well, I mean, there is the matter of there's about 1,000 or 1,500 people, Americans and people who did directly help us, who they're trying to get out, and they're trying to do it with private people, not U.S. government involved, and they're trying to do it through back channel negotiations with abject terrorists, as you say. So it's not known what effect that'll have. It's probably in the Taliban's interest marginally not to kill these people, to let them out of the country and facilitate it, make it difficult so no one else tries it, but to get rid of them. And there are probably more problems for them than they're worth. So I think those people will eventually get out. But I mean, this is the U.S. military, ran out with its tail between its legs. What we are arguing about here is the way in which they utterly abandoned a country in, about 96 hours, right? That we had been, we've been your lifeline for 20 years. And then in 96 hours, we pack up and go. And we don't even tell you don't have air support anymore. You don't have our intel support anymore. I, don't know how good that was to start with. But all the things that the air support was huge, right? It enabled them to exist. So, when you just pull the stuff out, you don't tell them, we made a calamitous, catastrophic error here with decades of consequences to come, right? We've signaled to the whole world that, America is easy to beat now, that we're weak, and we're indecisive, and we don't make considered decisions on these things. That the decisions we make are based on political theater and so forth. We want to get it done by 9/11, reasons like that. And it's a very perilous time in America for this, and it's not a decision to be blown off. So I don't know. It's interesting, and you can already want distance from it, because A, they know they screwed up. B, the polling is disastrous on this. And B, they want to move the spotlight off the people they have not gotten out. So, the media political complex, in which they marinate is, wholly for kicking this story under the covers.
All right. Now, I didn't put it on the discussion list here, but I do want to ask you this question, because I kept forgetting about it. That's why I didn't put it on the list, but it popped back into my mind. I wanted to get your opinion on this Huawei thing. So we had, they finally negotiated this release of this executive who'd been up in Canada. And so she was finally allowed to go home. And a couple of Canadians were released by the Chinese, and they were able to go home. But we've talked before about the Chinese stealing our technology and all of these things. I mean, the deal, I guess, was that she had admitted to some guilt, some things that they had misled and lied about. But those charges will then be dropped, and then I guess everything kind of goes away. Did the Chinese win this one in the long run? I mean,
yeah, I mean, they got caught spying and you got away with it. But I mean, you did disable the spy network, raise awareness that they're there. I mean, it will be looked for in a way that it wasn't looked for before. The hopefully the Canadians will keep an eye on it, and the Americans will keep an eye on it. And there's a lot more awareness now of like spying on you through your phone, and programs such as TikTok, right, that are just basically data dumps to the CCP. Although they're also pretty funny sometimes. So I mean, and we don't have a lot of expectation of privacy in the world anyway now. So that's how those things get settled, right? We give you your guys back. You're shut down from doing whatever you were doing for a while, and if you're going to do that again, you have to find a different way in.
Yeah, apparently, I guess it did cost Huawei a lot of money in terms of lost sales and things like that. And I think I heard that I guess the government is willing to go and reimburse a lot of the rural operators that had this Huawei equipment into their systems between now and January to get that out. So, I mean, I think we have raised the level of awareness. I don't know that Huawei will ever really be able to gain another foothold in there after that. And I think you have a point there in terms of, we're much more aware of that. I mean, I think also with the COVID overhang that we're going to have is that you're going to have a lot more people who are just a lot more leery about buying anything that's Chinese anyway. And we've seen how they operate worldwide. So I mean, I think something had to go at some point in time, because it seemed like a little bit of a stalemate that these Canadians were being held because the Chinese could do it, because that's what the Chinese communists will do, and they wanted to get their person back. So I think this was a fait accompli in the end. But hopefully we have learned some good lessons from this overall, and we'll just have to kind of wait and see about how that all plays out in the end. Now, sticking internationally, Germany. So Angela Merkel, did not run for re-election. We knew this for a long time that she wasn't going to run. So not having Merkel in the mix, first time in 16 years, really, right? She'd been there for 16 years, and it looks like the opposition this time, I guess, was the Social Democrats, I believe. But like a lot of Europe, you have to cobble together a government. She is going to basically be around until they form a government, and whether what the alliance will be. Some of the stories I've read said that even with the Social Democrats, even though they have the slight majority in terms of they're because they have to have a coalition government. There's not. They
have more than any. They have a plurality.
Plurality
than anybody else, but they don't have a majority.
Right. So they're not going to be able. They're not going to be able to rule with an accuracy. They're going to have to do what a lot of Europe does, which is, you take your group and you're going to have to find 2 or 3 other groups until you can get enough to actually form the government, and hopefully that holds together. But I guess as a result of that, a lot of people are saying that they don't expect a whole lot of change, from Germany as a result of that. But it was an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal the other day about Merkel and how she has kind of been moving away from the U.S. anyway. Even when Biden wanted to tried to get the call in, she was off on some kind of little vacation. She's like, I'm not taking this call until I come back. So, and she did not call Biden until she got back from this thing that she had already pre-planned. So I don't know what U.S.-German relations are going forward. I mean, Trump and Merkel didn't exactly get along, but I kind of expected that Biden would do what he's been doing, which has been just groveling and doing whatever he could to restore the old order. And
where we were getting fleeced and beaten like rid of
exactly. Right.
Let's get back to that as quick as we can.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, business. Yeah. I mean, do you have any thoughts about this potentially new government? I mean,
I agree with what your analysis. Not a whole lot should change. It went from a center party to a slightly center left party. It looks like the coalition partner, the most likely one is the Greens, which is a little farther left party. But they're not going to have the votes to do a whole lot in any direction, and I don't think that's what Germany wants. I think Germany wants a return to stability. Both sides kind of said, let's get to where things are normal and we can breathe. So, I don't know what changes in the near term.
Yeah, there was something too. I heard, though I didn't read deeply into it, that that going in there, they really weren't sure exactly how many seats in the Bundestag were going to be there, because depending upon the vote, you could have like 500 people or you could have like 700 people. It was some variance. There's a variable in there. It's not actually a set number. It actually varies depending upon the vote. I don't know. I mean, I find the parliamentary system fascinating in a lot of ways because of what it does. I mean, when we see this all throughout Europe, but at the same time, it can be befuddling trying to actually keep track exactly what the heck is going on. People call snap elections. I mean, we didn't really talk about this before, but you remember, I mean, Trudeau called an election, and
Right.
it didn't do him any good.
Right.
He basically stood still. No one really gained any ground. But the conservatives
Theresa May lost her opposition calling for a snap, or her majority calling for a snap election a few years ago. You remember that? I would love to have one here right now.
Yeah, I know.
For the US.
Mean, and that was my first thought was with Trudeau was after the election was that this is he risked happening what happened with Theresa May. I mean, he's lucky that he made, because Theresa May, she blew that whole thing. But a snap election now would change our landscape.
Yeah. Because Rasmussen says Trump would win by 10 points. Trump, not these other people, but Trump.
Yeah, I mean, I like Donald Trump in general, but I think I'm like I keep saying, I'm ready to move on from that, and everything like that. I like to see his policy, continue on. We've already seen, what happens with Biden as they back off of Trump policies and they try to go back to the old ways. Is that he's had nothing but one failure after another. It's just this is a disastrous presidency so far, and it doesn't get any better. I mean,
well, think about Trump as every time they poll Republicans on who should be our standard bearer in 2024, he wins by 50 points. I mean, he's not eking it out. He's winning like mid 70s to mid 20s over DeSantis, and and then the rest of them are far back in the pack. And I don't know. I mean, everybody's in love with DeSantis, but someone needs to explain to me, where does he find votes that Trump didn't get, right? Who's going to say, well, I just couldn't vote for Trump, but I can vote for DeSantis? Who is that voter? What's the profile of that voter, right? Because I guess there are some people that are just turned off by Trump to the point that, someone saying exactly what Trump says, they would go for it. But I don't know. I think DeSantis it scares me. He's a very capable politician, and he's definitely saying, all the right things, but it scares me that, that would be falling into a trap, that he would, it just looks like, he could be characterized, and, I don't know. I think that we need to keep him in mind, but keep others in mind too. I don't think that we need to slide him into that, if not Trump blank spot, yet. I think there's some.
No. I mean, I'm definitely not in favor of appointing DeSantis as the next Trump candidate type of guy at this point. I mean, there's no doubt. I think that one of the advantages that DeSantis has right now, obviously, is just pretty darn good, name recognition. I mean, it's coming from a very large state with a lot of votes, a lot of electoral votes. So it's good for him. And he's done a lot of the right things. He says the right things, and he's not as acerbic, I guess, as Trump is. Trump will burn bridges and doesn't really care. Trump is Trump. I mean, you're not going to change Trump. DeSantis dial. He doesn't rise to that level. And I think that you can trends and others that were just basically, they were totally turned off by Trump, and so they were willing to go and vote the other way. I think there are people that can be brought back. That in combination, and particularly, if this Biden-Harris administration continues to go along this path, and we get this is, to me, it leaves voters no choice. Really, it's like, I don't care what Democrat they put up at that point. I don't care if Biden decides not to run and put up Harris. Is that the track record is going to be so bad that that the Republicans have got to win this, with virtually any decent person who puts together the right policies and says the right things. Trump's sway and hold on the Republican Party is absolutely fascinating to me, because I don't recall any former president, who lost an election, remaining as popular and as influential, after that, and is
probably didn't lose the election,
and is a huge threat to basically retake the presidency later on. It's an amazing thing to watch. It's a fascinating time to watch politics as a result of that. It drives the media crazy. I'm sure it drives some Republicans crazy, but I'm kind of like, look, let the chips fall where they may. If Trump winds up being the nominee, I know where I'm going to be in 2024. Yeah. Fine, okay. I'm not going to work against the guy, right. But it's interesting. I mean, we still have. I mean, it's 2021. We've got 3 years before the election, so a lot can happen there. And 2022 will help crystallize it a little bit to see. We should easily retake the House. What happens in the Senate? I think it's still a little bit of a question mark, but something could emerge.
The momentum's going our way on the Senate.
Yeah, right. It is. And
the candidates are, the candidate matchups are working for Republicans right now. We're right. Ending up with the better name recognition guy in a lot of these spots.
Right.
The other thing is like, so, Trump is Trump from the last 7 months of his presidency, he spent 7 days on the Rasmussen Daily Presidential Tracking Poll at 43% or lower. Biden has spent 7 days this month at 43% lower. He was 40 on Monday. He was 41 yesterday. The one today is not out yet. But those are numbers. Trump spent about 4 or 5 days at 41 in his entire presidency. Right. And these were, these were, when he was fighting over the border wall, closed down the government and so forth. That's the only time he had polling anything like what Biden has now. And, that was solvable. Right. Once the government reopened and things returned to normal, his polling went back up and it stayed in the 45 to 51 range almost the rest of his presidency. Biden is below that. And it's not clear to me right now what he can do to get back, right? People say, well, he could get these bills passed, and he may get them passed. But I mean, I think those bills now, the infrastructure, the actual infrastructure bill and the reconciliation bill and so forth, Steve Moore says that if those bills both pass, Congress will have approved $12 trillion of spending in this calendar year. Think about that. So the national debt accumulated over almost 250 years is about 28 trillion, right? So they're talking about, almost half that much approved in this year alone, right? So, and I don't know how they do that. And, I guess they think that they can print money and stay ahead of it. But we're in some really perilous times, and they don't appear to have their fingers on the switches that would change it.
Right. No doubt about it. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, you talk about these low poll numbers. You could say, well, at this, going from here, he's, got nowhere to go but up. But I mean, he obviously could sink lower. But for someone who came into office with riding on such high hopes from the other side, the Democrats, the liberals, the media, thinking that this was going to, turn America back to where they needed to be. Biden's got his Build Back Better campaign, projects going and all these things like that. For someone who's now just a little over 8 months into his presidency, this is bad. I mean, this is about as bad, if not worse than anything I've seen in my lifetime for a president of either party to be facing. And it's going to be difficult because as we've talked before, and I've said before, many times either on the show or just publicly, is that with a midterm election a year away, in most cases, except except for the very liberal districts, Biden is not a guy that you want on the campaign trail with you. He is not going to help you right now. His poll number, he's not popular. The programs that he has have failed. I mean, we've got just, one issue after another piling up. And so he can't, pretty hard to get to put a guy out there with you to try to get yourself reelected when he's been an abject failure in 8 months. So, you've got to find someone else, some other way to get reelected. But Nancy Pelosi with this bill, I mean, with her push, she's putting a lot of these Democrats, forcing them to vote on this. This is where I think that's why Manchin, I think, from a Democrat standpoint, was the smart one, where he said, we really need to push this off, for another year. We've got to, they don't want this anywhere near election season, anything that could remotely affect the elections. Push this off because this is going to kill them for sure. And she doesn't, and the progressives don't want to vote for this thing anyway. She doesn't have the votes now, right?
Well, so a couple of things on that. Well, first of all, the Manchin's theory is that doing this in 2022, the political climate should be somewhat different, or that he hopes for it to be somewhat different because he can't like what it is now. This might be seen as fulfilling campaign promises and might actually be helpful on the campaign trail. Look what we just gave you: free dental, free community college, free childcare, free this, free that, right? So he actually thinks, hey, we can say we delivered on all these promises right before the election. So it will be helpful in that way. But I'm with you. I think that voting a huge hole. I think people have gotten to the point where massive government spending is not going to feed the bulldog here. I think we're off of, we were on a Keynesian mode for about 10 years. And I think people are looking at that now and saying, nope, we've tried that. We've, given money every which way to stimulate the economy. And what we've stimulated is inflation, right? Because money is cheap. We're on the, verge of, not being the world currency anymore, right? Because of the way that we're treating our dollar. They also have hanging over their heads, I guess Yellen says by October 18th, they'll have to raise the debt ceiling or quit spending. Well, it's not quit spending, but it's like you can't spend anymore, right? So, you can't borrow anymore, right? You're done borrowing. So, that's not a government shutdown, but it's a soft government shutdown. And, the Republicans have them by the whatevers right now legislatively, right? Because they can't pass this, debt ceiling by themselves. They can't pass their two, so-called infrastructure bills by themselves. And, they have control both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue, both houses of Congress. It's kind of hard to blame Republicans when you run Washington entirely and you can't get spending bills or debt ceiling across the finish line. So, the debt ceiling will get raised. They'll make a deal. There will be a lot of things, extracted, concessions extracted from the Democrats to deliver Republican votes for it. But, that is being set up as a, hostage situation very adeptly by McConnell. That's why, all Republicans, get mad at McConnell from time to time. He says something or does something that you consider, insufficiently, fealty to the ideas, insufficient fealty to our ideals. Looks like, like he said the other day, there will be no impeachment of Biden. So everybody, McConnell's against impeachment. It's like, no, they're in the minority party in both houses. So you can't bring it to a vote in the House. It will get voted down. And if it got to the Senate, it would not, impeaching him for policy differences is not going to work because they're not, they're not going to let you get away with it. So when he says, we're not going to have an impeachment vote in the House, he's absolutely right. And it's not anti-Republican to say that, but people don't understand it because they don't understand, what it is he's exactly saying. He's just telling you the reality of the situation is, we don't have the votes to do it, right? And he doesn't say that because, why say it, and say, hey, yeah, our idea is not sufficiently popular. but it's not going to happen, and it's not going to happen. So, the griping about, McConnell is it's a sport that all Republicans engage in from time to time, that Trump will go back and forth on this. He has just left a slam McConnell mode, but he's moving back toward a, at the end of the day, you got to give him his due mode. And I think that's where, it's headed. And, McConnell says of Trump that the most productive time he's ever spent in the Senate was when Trump was president. So.
Yeah. I mean, McConnell's always going to be, for Republicans, he's going to have a target on his back for whatever reason. I mean, and we see the ebbs and the flows with that. I've seen just like you have seen, conservatives, Republicans praise him one minute and then excoriate him the next. It just depending upon what McConnell says. But I think we both know that McConnell is, he's a masterful politician. He would not survive as long as he had if he has not been a very skilled politician in this. He knows what's going on. He knows how the system works. Taking impeachment off the table. I mean, it makes all sense of work. There's too much of this impeach at the drop of the hat kind of thing like that, without any real reason. I mean, they won't get anywhere with it anyway.
Yeah, it's how the Constitution, it's the beauty of our Constitution. So, I guess Lauren Boebert from Colorado and Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia have introduced separate packages of impeachment charges against Biden. They're not on the same thing. They're two separate ones. And if you think about it, that's what the House should be doing. The House is where, we get fired up about things and we just do things on the fired up, right? And the Senate is the cooling saucer where we say, hey, everybody relax and we'll think about this, right? So that's what's happening. And, we should hear from the grassroots that, yeah, we're mad as heck and some of this looks illegal to us and could be charged, and let's charge up the hill. That's what minority parties in Congress do. That's what they're supposed to do is, raise heck about the injustices, right? And now, the Senate says, your chances are not good here. If you get the 60 votes, call it off the calendar, we'll be happy to take it up. But they don't have that. It's the same as the debt ceiling. It's the same as their HR 1, John Lewis Act, whatever they're on this week. All their voting bills, they don't have 60 votes, so we shall see.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, we've got, we've the federal government, I mean, I guess their fiscal year expires tomorrow, right? That's September 30th, the traditional, they're still doing that. You're right on the debt ceiling. Yeah. I mean, they're going to either raise it or they will just suspend it again. Probably, one of those things. Something will happen because the one thing that no politician out there will allow to happen is they won't allow the U.S. to default on its obligations. They can fight about the spending issues in the budget and things like that. But I'm kind of waiting to see here. I don't know that Pelosi really, as skilled as she's supposed to be, really thought that she was going to get to the situation where, she's got her back up against the wall on this, and there's a possibility of, that the government could have to shut down under a Democrat, which is they don't want to see
Democrats at both ends of both houses of Congress too.
Yeah,
I mean, Nancy doesn't appear to be the vote counter / vote whipper that she used to be, right? I mean, the progressives on one side and the moderates on the other are pretty dug in to foil her, right? She doesn't have the votes. They have a argument over which order they pass these bills, right? And she doesn't appear to be. I mean, that's a procedural thing. A good speaker manages that situation mostly probably out of the limelight and gets everybody, okay, we'll do it this way and we promise this and so forth. But I mean, as recently as yesterday, Jayapal and Ocasio-Cortez, members of the Democrat Progressive Caucus, have said they're not voting for it like it is, right? And they're not going to give in. So, she has not managed this, as well as, the masterful legislator she supposedly should be expected to do it, right? It's been off the rails, and she doesn't appear to have control over it. So, at some point, something's got to give, because they do have to do something to reopen the government because the government is about to close, and then they have to have something to do to raise the debt ceiling because, it shouldn't be raised, but like you say, they're not going to let them default.
Yeah, I mean, and we talked. I mean, you mentioned how Biden's poll numbers are low. I mean, the government shuts down, he's going to lose several more points off of his popularity.
Right.
I mean, it's
That's what I've been watching, like researching polling, and Trump's worst time of polling the entire time he ran for president was when he shut down the government. He was never in that trouble polling wise ever again.
Yeah, and I mean the president is they will take the blame. I mean, they're in, the buck stops there. They're supposed to be able to handle this, but yeah, I think Biden is just really lost.
Yeah,
I just don't. It doesn't seem to know really what the heck's going on here with much of anything.
We have some like boobs around him. The DHS guy doesn't manage to get his story straight. We've already talked about the people running defense and defense intelligence and how they've missed the mark. The Secretary of State, it looks like he was caught in the headlights and wants no part of nothing. Vice President can't be found most of the time. She's supposed to be on the border or wherever. She went to the border one time for 15 minutes or whatever, right? They're not doing the things that people care about. So, and they appear to be pretty inept, which was their whole case was, Trump doesn't know what he's doing, and these ideologues that work for him, they're ignorant and hate everybody. And like, you've got guys who are ignorant and hate everybody, and they're bumbling through their thing. At least Trump, it wasn't a bumble fest like this is.
Yeah, no, and so the Haitian situation has cleared up in the sense of they got them out of Del Rio, right? I mean, they sent some back to Haiti, which Haiti accepted. I mean, some of these people hadn't been to Haiti for 10 years. They had fled Haiti, after the earthquake, and they had gone to places like Chile and made new lives for themselves. But they decided that they might have a better life in the U.S. thanks to Joe Biden. So they all make their way, to the U.S. Overwhelm us. But the reports are they're up to there may be as many as 12,000 people, maybe even more, that the U.S. They released into the United States. And they're supposed to report back to an immigration office, right, in 60 days. Okay. Yeah, that's going to happen. They're going to come back and report back in 60 days. Are you kidding me? And what's their vaccine status? I mean, come on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you're going to make all these other people do it, and you're just letting them go, the point of the whole vaccine thing is coercion. It's long past been about anything medical. Right? It is to force us to do something, and to show that they have the power to force us to do something that personal. That's the whole point of it. And, and if that were not true, then they'd be working out passports for people with the natural immunity, and other science supported stuff. Right. But it's not that. It's make you take the approach they want you to take and not allow any other approaches and try to bottle you into this one way out of this, right? Which the scientific efficacy of is slipping by the day, right? Near now up to, in Israel, you're up to 80% of the people showing up now to hospitals with COVID were vaccinated, 80%. So they had the vax. They did what you said, right? The other thing is, if one of these bills, one of the big bill, the $3.5 trillion bill, which Steve Moore says is actually a $5 trillion bill when you unravel what all it is. Okay, one of the things it calls for is the non-interference clause to be eliminated. That means that they want the government to be able to negotiate drug prices on the theory that if you get the big government buyer at the table, he'll be able to, saw down those drug prices, Okay, so the Moderna vaccine, it costs $1 a dose to make. Moderna sells it for $28 a dose. So the next time someone says we'd be better off if government negotiated drug prices, remind them of that, because that's not very good. We're giving you the biggest order it is possible for us to give you, and you're making 2,800% profit on us. So, no thanks.
Yeah, drug prices, I don't know. I mean, there's always been this blowback, particularly from the left about high drug prices and all this stuff, how much these, doses, some things cost $400 or $500, a dose and things like that. But, rarely do they ever really mention, the millions of dollars, that these companies spent on research and development to get there. As a capitalist, they say they deserve they have a right to make back their money, because if they invest a ton of money in research and not all this stuff pans out anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, does it need to be $28 a dose to get your money back, to count your R&D?
I don't know.
I don't
know the answer.
Like a lot to me. So
right. I mean, on the face of it, it does seem like a lot, but I mean,
and it's not. Most of these things, it costs a lot of money, but they researched it for years. They had years of clinical trials. They did this in 9 months, right? They didn't have years of clinical trials. They're not paying for this over and over and over, right? They did this on the quick, right? So that was the whole idea: get it done quick. So. I don't know. I think you can look at them and say, yeah, they gouged us, but we let them gouge us. We thought, hey, we got to have this thing. So now what you're getting out of it is a few weeks to a few months of where it seems that you will get less sick if you get it, right? It's not you can't transmit it. It's not you can't catch it, right? It's you may not get as sick if you get it, right? And so judged against the side effects, I don't think that's a very good deal anymore.
Yeah, and now we've got booster shots going out there. Biden, got his booster shot, wants to show everybody it was good to do that. I mean, just to quickly, kind of steer to the to like the NBA, that's the vaccine has become a big controversy, right? Kyrie Irving, LeBron has said, has gone out there, but he's not going to promote vaccines because he thinks it's an individual choice and that's a personal choice. These are tough. Yeah, Bradley Beal.
Yeah, he said he's not getting it.
Yeah, so I mean, what effect does that have on the season? I mean, if you go to a state that says in order to do something you have to be vaccinated, does that mean these players don't play that particular game because of that? I mean, there's all kinds of scenarios that pop up, right?
Right. Well, the guy for New York, they're saying he can't play in his home games. That's half his season, right?
Kyrie.
You can't do that in New York. And there's a team in New York. So you can't play in your home games or your road games at the other New York team, right? So, I think that they're going to have to work this out. And I think that, one of the things that happened is like the cool kids, the people, the trendsetters, the like BLM, a lot of these basketball players, so forth, are coming out and saying, no to max vax mandates. And it's to the, you're having protests all over. There was a big protest in New York City the other day. They are at the end of this month, which I guess is today or tomorrow, right? A lot of these people are going to get fired for not getting tested. Like, you have hospitals all over the country. Hey, 40% of our staff is going tomorrow, and I look on Twitter this morning, people are like, good, get rid of them. It's like, really? You want to go to a hospital that just lost 40% of its nurses? Does anybody go and stick a microphone in those nurses and doctors' faces and say, hey, you're a medical professional. You've been around COVID, more than anyone else. And you are looking at this thing and saying no. Why are you saying no? What is your hesitancy to taking this vaccine, right? Because it would seem to me that would be kind of relevant to know how the people with the most intimate knowledge of this are saying no.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's hard because, then we have, what goes on in the schools, and I'm glad to see schools back in session and things like that. But, when the vaccine is available for the kids, I don't know that I would have a problem, if the school says, you need to have that to go to school going forward, because, I went to school and I had, I had to have XYZ vaccines in order to go to school.
But when you take those vaccines, then you don't get those diseases, right? That's not the case here. This is possibly not as damaging for a few months. That's all they can offer you now, right? Because, it doesn't prevent it. It doesn't prevent you giving it to other people. All it prevents, supposedly, is that you don't get quite as sick, right? That's all they're saying. And, the fact of the business is most people don't get very sick on it anyway. The truth is, it's a 99.9% survival. In schools, you're talking about doing it in schools. In schools, there's about 80 million people in the United States who are 18 or younger, and fewer than 500 of them have died with COVID. It's not even sure they all died of COVID. So, those numbers to me do not justify mass vaccination. They justify research into how to better treat it, maybe, but not to prevent. I think we need to, it's endemic. The animals have it. It's everywhere. You're not going to avoid it. You're not going to vax your way out of it. The thing is time to get realistic and, put your attention on, either, ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine. That's the other thing. It's like, when there are cheaper drugs that take care of this, they don't want that either, right? They don't want you to have the choice to say, hey, I'll just treat it, right? When there are ready treatments that are proven to work, no, we don't want that because those drugs are cheap. Moderna does not get 2,800% profit on selling ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. In fact, I understand that Moderna had never brought a product of any kind to market until the vax. Do you know about that?
No, I hadn't looked into that. I mean, they basically came on the scene pretty quickly in terms of this type of thing. Like a lot of companies, they would have been around for a while, but there's so many biotech type of companies and, pharmaceutical companies that just never see the light of day. They struggle to get through. That's always a possibility. I'm thinking too, just, this vaccine is definitely not, as effective as, mumps, measles, polio type of things like that, where we pretty much eradicate that. It may take years before we get to that level, or it will be, as we have talked about before, is that, the COVID thing will be a lot like the flu, and the flu shot is not required of school kids. So, maybe that's it. It's just that so few kids, as you pointed out, have gotten this thing, have died from this, or died from this thing, and more kids have gotten it. But that, maybe it is more flu-like in that sense that, since we don't require the kids to get the flu shot, why should we require school kids to get the COVID vaccine? But that'll be a parental decision in the long run because they're minors. The parents are going to have to make that decision anyway. So maybe
almost half the people in the country get the flu shot pretty faithfully every year. It's about 48%. So, you'll get 48% go do it every year anyway, right? And just, it could be part of the flu shot. I guess it's a SARS virus. They're the same, you're on the same spectrum. I'm not a medical person, but it would seem to me that could be included if people are concerned about it. But I think the idea that we're going to stop it and prevent it and make it go back in a hole is, we're done with that. And you have countries like Denmark, Sweden, and so forth that are saying, this is over here. The UK, we're not doing this anymore. We're not acting like, we can prevent this, and we're not, our whole program's over. We're back to life. So, I think that the political pressure is going to point that way here. I don't know what's up with Australia. How do they get out from under that? There's no better argument for the Second Amendment than Australia, right? Those people gave up their guns and then they lost all their power to even leave their houses. I mean, think about that. So, it's really made for some bad politics in this country, and we can't get it over with quick enough for me.
All right, 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Let's see what's on here that we did not get to. So I just will say that two things. One is that you have down here. One is the Arizona audit. They recounted the ballots and they got more or less the same totals. But they also found that up to about almost 500,000 votes of that may be fraudulent. So, the media comes out and says, oh, they got the same count. Ha, ha, ha. Well, yes, but they also have established that, it looks like 57,000 ballots, which is 5 times the margin of victory, were duplicate, right? And then there's some problems with another 400,000 ballots or so. So, you know, what they found was pretty damning. The internet was hooked up to the voting machines, right? So, you know, there's a lot to come there, and I don't, you know, I don't think that that's over yet. The other thing is, I will just note that you had the Justin Tucker kicked a 66-yard field goal to beat the Detroit Lions for Baltimore the other day. The record field goal for a long time in the NFL, for more than 30 years, was a 63-yard field goal that Tom Dempsey kicked in 1970 to beat the Detroit Lions on the last play of the game. It's always those Lions. I didn't think about that. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, and Justin got, I mean, you know, he got the right doink, right?
Yeah, that's right. And
the ball bounced exactly the right way for him.
Yeah, I remember when Dempsey kicked his, that Christmas, he came to Shreveport and he set up in a shopping center and parking lot in Shreveport, a big, vast concrete parking lot, and kicked field goals into the crowd. There must have been 10,000 kids there. I could see the balls come up, but I never got close to getting one. But one of my friends, you know, I put this on the internet, on the Facebook one day. One of my friends, I got one of those footballs. I got it. So, yeah, he was a huge, you know, hero in Louisiana. He had a half hand and a club foot, and you know, had done this. And he just died in the last few weeks. But he was a big man on campus in New Orleans for all the rest of his life.
Yep. Great guy. Just somebody who'll always be remembered in NFL football history for sure. Yep. All right, everyone. Thank you once again for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed it. Please, as always, stay safe, stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anybody tell you otherwise. And as always, God bless America, and we will see you again next week.